Now, starting our series of talks and collaborative exchanges is a strategy to fast track tourism recovery based on travel demand and what our leaders can do to assist local tourism. To give her insights, let's welcome a veteran in the financial services sector as well as a leader in fintech talk about pivoting from traditional to digital. She has advised the public and private sectors on how to become competitive and improve their services. Ladies and gentlemen, from McKinsey and Company, Ms. Jen Sodpraset.
In scenario A1, right, with the partially effective interventions and support from the government. So, and if you see the number on the top right-hand corner, so there is always like a variety of belief, but at the end, people are staying in the A1 scenario as the most. With that, we actually also do the survey not only once. The first time we did it was back in April 2020, and then we continue to conduct the survey up until even this year, back in June 2021. Very interesting is that the different line that we see here is that like people are still having like very hopeful. However, the bad news is that we see a lot of like the variants of the virus. And then we see like the blue line is the latest line that we have surveyed and asked the executive. When we look at like the air traffic recovery using the A1 scenario, what we see is that actually the recovery is slower and slower. You see the blue line compared to the black line above, right? That is actually deeper and become more of a U shape. However, at the same time, I think people are still very hopeful that they believe that back in 2023, the world economy or the air traffic recovery would actually rebound and finally be above the original timeline back in 2019. So the key message here is that it would be still, we are living with this pandemic for a few more years, but then at the end, there is still light at the tunnel. Earlier, we hear from the Philippine Tourism Board, right, about like everyone is looking to start to travel. If we're looking at the trend from like the forward booking by purchase date, look, this is from like the travel between the United Arab Emirates and worldwide, and the blue chart, the blue line here is the travel from United Arab Emirates to United Kingdom. On the 5th of August this year, when UK announced that to move the UAE to its amber travel list, meaning allow the travel from UAE to UK easily, you can see that there is a strong demand, the pent-up demand, that the blue chart spiked up highly. Like after like the announcement on the 5th, by the 7th, there is a lot of future booking happening. So this really shows that there is a strong pent-up demand, and the travel will surge once the recession is lifted. Now, looking as well, like we have talked about like the air travel trend. If we are looking at like the hotel recovery, right? So this analysis show the Asia's recovery is quite mixed so far. We look at the different countries, right? You can see that there is like from January 2019, that was very healthy. Everyone is traveling, right? There is like a lot of monthly hotel, the revenue per available night is quite high. But once the pandemic hit, coming in the 2020, the revenue actually dropped quite significantly, and the bottom in April 2020. Afterward, we can see that many countries start to recover, but then like leading the pack, if you see on the right-hand side, is the China is actually back in, compared to 2019, is already back to like the same level at 2019, followed by India, Australia, Japan, and Thailand, right? Even though it's one of like the biggest travel destination, the recovery is only 17%. what it say here is that actually the majority of all these countries, the recovery happened with they have a strong domestic market, because like the international border is still closed. But then with the strong domestic market, people are just yearning to travel. So once the open, like there is no lockdown in the country, people still travel within the domestic market. And that is the low hanging fruit, that the demand that each of the country can grab. Hence, based on what we have seen earlier on these different scenarios, we summarize that there are the three key trends that we should observe, and is actually accelerated by COVID. The first one is that about the government, right? We know that the government has always played such a strong role in the tourism industry, but now more than ever, like the government is having even a larger role in dictating the recovery of the tourism sector. And to that end, right, I'm very heartened to see how active the Philippine government is been trying to help and support the industry, and would be able to push and make sure the Philippine tourism can recover as fast as it could. One of the key thing that is really important from the government is around these measures to ease and control the restrictions and stimulate the economy during the pandemic. So this one would, more than ever, we would see we would have to really ask our government to really help and support the industry. The second one is also very prevalent, right? We have seen a lot of the consumer shifting the behavior. Actually, in travel, from even before COVID, right? People are already quite digitally savvy, but I think more than ever now, we see that digital is become part of your travel journey, and we will see this trend continue, has fastened and accelerated a lot, and it is here to stay. The second thing that we could also see is that about the healthy and security, that is what the travelers would also very prioritize. And the last trend, which is very encouraging, is that we know that a lot of people losing jobs, right? And the business in the tourism industry is the most affected from the pandemic. But at the same time, a lot of new business models, a lot of new way of operating, all the operators has been doing to try to sustain during the pandemic, is something that I would like to ask all the participants to also think about, and this kind of innovation, taking that as inspiration, and see how you best also for your own business to adjust and adapt to survive during this tough time. If we look into these three trends in more detail, first, around the government playing a larger role, right? This is around really about a different type of country that you see that the country are moving into the different archetype. We classify the countries into three archetypes here. On the left-hand side, type A is the high vaccination. These are the countries that their current immunity level is quite high overall. They have a lot of vaccination, right? Hence, the recent case burden is decreasing, or there is low new case occurring in the country. As a result, then the extent of the public health measure is being loosened, or opening up. This kind of country example that we see is the US, right? That the attitude is I'm doing all the vaccination that I can, then I can be more relaxed about letting people in and out, and also as part of the European country. The second archetype that we see is we call it the case controllers. They also, the current immunity level in the country might be low to moderate, but the recent case burden is almost close to zero. They try to control that there is no resurgence of a new case, the COVID case in the country. And hence, as a result, there is such a strong control on the border, and also the public measures shut down, and really strong social distancing requirement. This country, the very clear example that we see is Australia, New Zealand, China, and Singapore. So even though China earlier, we see that there's a big recovery because they can rely on their domestic market and they don't want to risk their own country economic and their livelihood. So hence they have still put a very strong control on their border. The last group of the country are the country that are the archetype that we call is the at-risk country, meaning like the immunity level is still quite low to moderate. Hence, they start to experiencing or at risk of like a big wave coming in. Yet there is a limited resource for the public health measures. So these are the country example would be India, Colombia, Nepal, or like part of Africa, right? Different country would have their own strategy how to do it. But what we have seen is that a lot of the case controller from like the people from the case controller country, actually they can travel over to the high vaccination country. Likewise, the at-risk country can move to, can do the travel back to like the high vaccination archetype countries. Giving this type of like the economic flow and as a destination, right? It almost seems that if you really want to have your country open up the border quicker without risking the resurgence of the case again, the high vaccination would be something that could help with the activating or stimulating the travel economy faster. So you could slowly see like the case controller country over time, they could move to the high vaccination, and similarly for the high risk would also try to move the high vaccination. This one is just show about like the traveling to and from, right? Of course, the country that is like the high vaccination, they are actually quite open for people from like either the high vaccinated country or even the at-risk country to come over. The country that is actually become the case controller, like China, Singapore, that we just mentioned, because like they are so strict, they themselves wouldn't allow like the tourists, their own traveler to visit any other country. Hence, it's still gonna be, that would be a significant restriction, the hotel quarantine or even the absolute ban put in place, right? While the other country are a little bit more open and there would be more free travel. What is the implication here? The implication here is that we need to monitor this country attitude, right? The strategy, whether they are moving or not. And the biggest traveler pool in the world previously, before the pandemic, is China, right? The Chinese used to travel, 120 million Chinese are traveling globally every year before the pandemic. With the pandemic coming in and this restriction being put on China, so like the type of travelers that you would be able to expect from the source country would probably have to shift. Looking into like the consumer behavior trend, right? This survey is actually conducted right before the pandemic. We did a global traveler survey back in 2019 about the consumer behavior. There is already quite clear trend of like the digital coming in. There is like the new search habits, right? Online booking is already there, but there are some challenges, right? When there was like, even before the pandemic, the travelers, like 90% of them are influenced by the online reviews, right? They also use a lot, 77% travels like social media, use the social media in their research, right? And also like 72% use the mobile booking that happened within the 48 hours of last minute booking. The online booking is taking prevalence. We see a lot of people using smartphone as well as like the general search engine to book their travel. There are some challenges that the travelers start to experience, which is like the the traveler is frustrated of not knowing which company to trust online, right? They're frustrated that sometimes they cannot access the travel booking information 24/7 through their mobile device, or like not able to talk to human when they have issue or like the questions. So all these are like actually showing the trend that traveler actually already becoming more digital. With that as a background, right? When the pandemic hit in 2020, we see that we actually have covered a decade in days, right? For on the digital evolution. We used to joke that actually like everyone wants to do digitization, right? And the COVID-19 is the one that helped we push this the digitization faster than ever. We see like everyone now like using the online delivery, right? 10 years in, like we have like it's the volume in e-commerce deliveries has increased like similar to the last 10 years in the matter of 8 weeks, right? The telemedicine has 10 times subscribers within the 15 days, right? Remote working, or like the conference that we are doing right now, we see like 20 times participant in Zoom, right? In the first 3 months. The remote learning, this is in China, right? Like there are a lot of students immediately go up onto like the 250 million in 2 weeks, right? They set up all this online learning for the students. And the online entertainment, right? Netflix took like 7 years, right? When Disney Plus launched, they can achieve the pace of where Netflix is in 5 months time. So these are really like we see like a lot of digitization actually happening now. It become part of like the new normal life that we are here. The last one that we cannot talk about, from the consumer side, right, the traveling, that it seems like the digital would be the trend. People really want to travel. We also would like to also look at the business travel as well, right? That like the new way, this work from home, remote setup, the business travel, what we see is that it would be impacted more than these remote working technologies. Unlike the visiting friend and family and sightseeing, right? Then people really want to enjoy and go be in the destination. Right now, with the remote working technologies being in place for the past year, or almost 2 years now, right? It's changing the way of nature of like the business travel. We have interviews quite a few global travelers that used to really kind of roam the world for their work and their professional, like some of like the tech company. What we have heard is that the non-essential business trip may be substituted by the remote working. They start to learn that for the day trip, the business pitch type, it's so easy, right? That you can just maybe even like when the travel open now, they start to do that. They can visit the client alone and then have like all the engineer or the expert dial in from the video conference, right? The frequency and duration of like business trip could also drop, because it used to be like after like all these professional service firms, they used to have to work at the client site from Monday to Friday every week. Now with the remote Zoom in place, people are starting to feel like, oh, they can come back on Thursday and just using Friday for like some weekly meeting that can be conducted via Zoom. So this would also impact the amount of travel that is done by the business. The most impacted sector, I would also say, is the MICE industry, right? That we need to really reinvent the value proposition to recapture the market. Just like what we are having like the discussion today, right? Like the on-site kind of attendance is actually dropping, right? Like the attendance of the automotive fair is declining, the book fair is declining attendance. We do see that for the MICE industry, it would be a long and the difficult road to recover. Just the last trend that we would like to share about this new idea on like the new business model that is emerging, that hopefully is also a good food for thought for all the business operator here. The first one is that we have heard about like the difficult in terms of like looking the job market is impacted from the shutdown of due to the pandemic, right? There is like quite a few companies that actually want to take care of their own employees. They go in and building this redeployment platform that can help match the hospitality employers with the urgent needs, or like and vice versa, right? Like they could have like this platform to help match the employee with in the hospitality, and who might be able to also pivot their service to more like the local kind of market need, right? So this example is one company called Eightfold, right? They build a technology platform that help match the supply and demand of the frontline hospitality people, right? The second one, that is, we see the merging of with this pandemic and also the hospitality that you could leverage your existing capacity, right, for the other use. For example, right, this is the Movenpick hotel chain actually partner with BDMS, which is the hospital group in Thailand, that they set up this wellness resort that they launched a health watch package, which basically is this ASQ, the alternative state guarantee kind of facility, right? So like the hospitality or the hotel group actually working with the hospital group during this pandemic to convert some of their existing empty hotel room to also provide us the quarantine for use. That's one. Recently, I also see that a lot of like the hotel, when they were closed during the pandemic, right? They have enough room, so they are actually converting the room in the hotel, like the suite, into more of like for the restaurant. Then that one can help to like kind of control like the social distancing. So the patronage to the restaurant you can actually take more group of people, and then they are more spread out and still within the maximum control of the country that impose whether it's 5 people, 10 people per group, right? So those are some of like the quite innovative idea that the hotel are thinking and trying to generate new income during this pandemic. And not to mention, right, the one that is the most common is the staycation. I'm pretty sure a lot of you probably also just want to spend like just a weekend away from like kind of your work from home and you're staying at home all the time. The staycation is actually a big trend that the resort operator are going in. The last one that if you're looking from, just want to also look into from like the airline, right? Or like actually people are looking to service and working out, like trying to stimulate the travel together along the whole value chain, right? So we know that there is this concern about the COVID case. Emirates early last year, like after I think middle of last year, immediately launched this COVID-19 testing during the check-in at Dubai airport, right? So like the travel operator cannot just say like, I'm an airline, right? I'm not gonna care, like people have to go check the COVID test and come. They actually step up and try to provide this test, working together with the government or like the hospital to make this happen, to facilitate for people to travel early. So this is more like the thought about like when you innovate about like the business, it's not only about your business. You need to think about how to facilitate the whole value chain for the travelers. And with all that, right, I guess I just want to leave the last thought for everyone here is like what to do next, right? As a travel operator, first, we still need to really continue to focus on the domestic tourism, especially like the attractive high-end segment. That is the fastest recovery. Second, with the change in the way of the remote working, the digital adoption, we need to innovate the product to be more leisure focused. So that would be like the key segment that would recover first before like the business travel. Third one that we already share is about this. We have to explore the alternative businesses to sustain through the pandemic, right? be it like converting your existing asset, think through what asset that you have currently that you would be able to leverage for any other adjacent and alternative business, just like what you have seen the other hotel operator, airline, or even like the tech platform is been doing, right? And the last one is we continue to be hopeful and prepare for the international restart, the capacity ramp up and smooth reopening, but need to think through like the stimulate this demand along the whole value chain. So those would be like the 4 next steps that I would like to leave with everyone, and open for any Q&A here at the end.
Thank you very much. That is Ms. Jen Sodpraset. Jen, am I saying your surname correctly? Okay, I couldn't hear that. If you don't mind, maybe repeating that. But we'll get back to how to properly pronounce your name. But before we proceed with our Q&A, I would just like to invite our viewers, our audience members, all of the participants to please send in your questions for Ms. Jen, especially now that she is done with her presentation. If there's anything you want her to expound on, if there's anything that you would like her to clarify or explain further, please send your questions over through either Zoom, or if you are watching this or on Zoom, okay? It's best to send it over on Zoom. Send it over right now. That way you give us enough time to collate all of those questions and we can ask her right after this. But before we proceed with the Q&A, I would like to give a shout out to MAVP Travel and Tours. That's MAVP Travel and Tours, as well as the members of the United Travel Agencies and Operators Association. Thank you very much for joining us. Okay, now we are going to start with our questions and bring more ideas and opinions out. Who knows, your question may just lead to another solution. Now, our viewers online are also invited to comment their thoughts in the comment section, and we will do our best to get back to you. Okay. Can we now have the first question, please? Okay, here it is. Before I get to this question, Jen, may I have the correct pronunciation of your surname, please?
So it's Jen Sodpraset.
Sodpraset.
Wow, perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you. I heard perfect. Yay, I am happy with that. Okay, this is a question for you coming in from, I hope I'm saying this correctly, Mai or May. Is artificial intelligence part of digital technology? Will advances in technology replace the need for the human touch in the tourism industry? What's your take on this, Jen?
There are 2 parts of like the AI, right, that could help. I think in terms of using the AI to do some like customer service inquiries, to use it to replace some of like the need for like the call center response, I think that's possible. But at the end, if it's like the travel in the kind of the in-person service, that part the AI would never be able to do and replace, I believe, right? But there is a lot of support that you could do to lessen the load of like in terms of like incoming queries. And we have seen that in like the e-commerce platform, right? Like when they have like the big promotion, a lot of people calling in, you could actually use AI to help to respond to the queries of the people. So that could happen, but it's not going to be meaning that you walk into the hotel or like a destination site and you have like a robot to greet you. I think that would not the same human touch, right? So then there would be still a balance between the use of AI in different scenarios.
Thank you very much for that. You know what? I don't mind having my problems or concerns addressed by artificial intelligence initially, But down the line, I still want to speak to a human, you know? So I don't know how others would feel about that. I don't know. There's just something about speaking to another human being. So, like you said, maybe there will be some services that can be addressed using AI, but there are others that still need that human touch. This is coming in from SML. Should temperature checking, contact tracing, and digital health passport be mandatory after a pandemic? What do you think?
This is really depend on the country strategy that we showed earlier, right? Those with the case controller that we call, I believe that they would want to control and then stay there, right? But then for the country, after if they move the strategy to the high vaccination, then those could be eased after a while. What we believe is that once for this high vaccination country, their strategy is that they try to give the vaccination to everyone as much as possible. And over time, right, this pandemic become another flu, right, that people are, that we need to live through. We believe that with the technology in the medical and pharmaceutical, I'm hopeful that within 1 or 2 years, we could reach that state for everyone in everywhere in the world.
We will hope for the same thing. Thank you very much, Jen. All right, third question. Did the technologies affect employment in the tourism industry even before the pandemic?
Well, I think yes, technology affect the employment not only in the tourism industry, right? In every industry, even before the pandemic, right? But there are two ways, right? It's not replacing, but it helped to improve the productivity of the employee even before the pandemic, and in every sector. It's more about they are creating a new type of job as well. And now we actually probably have to we can use the technology to help with the employment, right? That one of the example I showed earlier, that with the technology, it actually helped to fly and then matching the need for the frontline job in the hospitality with the operator that need it, right? Or using the technology to create all these the event that we have, even though we cannot be in person together. So net, yes, technology does affect the employment, but there is all both good and bad, right? The increase and decrease. And in any case, we have to live with it, right? And we should be able to try to find a way to leverage technology that would help with our future livelihood, right? Work less, but then enjoy more.
Thank you very much. I like that. Work less, enjoy a little bit more. Here's another question from, I hope I'm saying this correctly, John Levare Arellano. I hope I'm saying your surname right or well. Based on the statistics that have been presented, can we see or determine how many years from now the tourism industry will be back on track?
This is like a $1 million question, right?
Your foresight, your prediction.
Yes, we were looking at that earlier, but then as I show, right? So originally, I what we believe is that, well, maybe it depends on the country, right? Some country like Thailand, which is very heavily relying on the international travel, you see, even though with the tourism domestic, they only recover about 17%. What we believe is that it probably would take. Originally, we thought it would be 2023, that it would be the GDP would recover back to 2019. But with the Delta variant coming in, right, the kind of the effectiveness of the control of this case is not as effective. Then right now, the latest view is that it will be back to the 2019 level, probably in 2024, right? And these things are keep moving, but with the recent kind of the vaccination rate, right now the latest, let's say the latest belief for the world to recover back to the 2019 level is around 2023 in general.
Okay, we will hold on to that instead. Instead of thinking it will be in 2024, let's all hope and pray for 2023. Thank you so much. Here's another one from a CSAV student who will remain anonymous. What are the disadvantages of using AI services, especially in the tourism industry? What do you think?
Actually, yeah, like you mentioned earlier, right? At the end, like especially in travel, like you want the human touch and feel, right? Um, the I could see like really like because we have seen the application of the use case in terms of like the response to the inquiries, right? But the downside there would be like you are lacking the definitely the human touch, right? And in terms of like the travel, it's more difficult than just the e-commerce, right? The e-commerce you can use like I think like 60% because it's asking about the same thing, right? Oh, when is my delivery is gonna come? Like I cannot pay, right? But for tourism, right, there are so many different type of question or like that need to be addressed. It's very difficult to have like a standard pattern, and without that kind of standard pattern, having AI to give the right response is actually quite tough. So the downside of having the AI to respond is two things, right? First, it would take some time, I think, before like we can develop the AI to be able to respond just like the way human would respond. And ultimately, if you don't do that right, you could create a bad experience for the travelers, and that you don't want, right?
Thank you very much, Jen. I think with AI, it's more of figuring out how AI can supplement instead of replace the humans, right? It's really more of what can we delegate to the AI so we can have the humans for bigger tasks, for bigger responsibilities. We've got another, this is actually our final question, and this one's coming in from Regine Avena, who's asking for the MICE industry or the MICE industry, if we are to shift to domestic market, leisure-based activities as suggested in the next steps, what would you recommend? Thank you, Regine, for that question.
I think like what the MICE industry has to do, right, would be two part, right? Yes, the first one, like focusing more on not only for like this kind of only international, right? So like kind of making it like a smaller event, but then kind of focusing on the domestic demand, right, and the interest of the people. It could be more like the leisure focus. So for like the broad leisure focus, then it could be within like different location, right? The geography that could happen. But then like for the broader, the big kind of international, like the Guangzhou kind of type of like big trade fair, that could take a long time, right? So I would really recommend that for the immediate 1-2 years before the border actually open, thinking through more of like what are the type of different interests that within your domestic country they might have interest, right? And then have that as a theme. Or so that's one. Second one is like if it's more like the incentive trip, right? Philippines is also quite blessed with like a lot of very nice natural beaches and like the really nice location. So then like you can develop and try to go to like the unseen, right? The new location that the typical like the domestic trip would, it actually might help the industry, right? To also go to a new foreign place that they haven't been before to discover. So I would say these two parts, right? First one is like for the domestic trade, kind of the trade fair, like looking at the local, the leisure, like kind of the demand of the local, what is the big interest, and you can organize based on that theme. The second part is that exploring to have like this kind of trip to more like introduce new exotic experience, even for the domestic kind of the local people, right? There must be a lot of like the destination that the people who used to only live in Manila might not never been to. So that would be the two angles that you should think about.
Thank you very much. Please send her love virtually. That is Miss Jen Sodpraset. Thank you very much. Thank you for that insightful discussion, and thank you for answering the questions that have been sent in by our participants. Thank you, Jen. Have a wonderful day ahead of you.